Hello everybody, Stephanie here, aka Wolfpack, and Eli's around here somewhere. Anyway, on to what is going to happen. This is part 2 of me reading from Carol Higgins Clark, her book called Deck. And it is her first book of her series, and I just absolutely love it, and I hope you guys too. I do have it listed down below to purchase on Amazon if you're interested, or if you just want to read along with me as well. And you will be watching me working on my rhinestone kit in a kind of a fast manner. And I hope you enjoy me listening to me. I hope you do anyway. Listening to me and watching me complete a section of the painting. I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it. Until next time, enjoy. Chapter 3. Even for England it was chilly for mid-June. The sun was trying unsuccessfully to cut through the clouds. Regan and Kit, both dying for a cup of hot English tea, quickened their pace as they hurried into town to the Noseburg. Regan poked Kit as they passed Keble College, famous for its ugly exterior in the midst of so much archaeological beauty. Remember having dinner there? That was incredible. It was so regal, sitting all those guys in their flowing black gowns and watching that faculty parade into that ancient dining hall with the long wooden tables. All I remember is Simon correcting me on which spoon to use. Oh yeah. At the Noseburg, a cozy restaurant known not only for its Laura Ashley decor and good food, but also for its soft classical background music that was unobtrusive, but just loud enough to create an atmosphere. They found 4 of their classmates who had also come back for the reunion. They immediately merged into a larger pine table, ordered a full English breakfast, began the inevitable. Do you remember? From there, they progressed to, have you heard? The hot news offered by Kristen Libby, who had arrived 3 days early and had a chance to catch up on the gossip. Was that Professor Philip Whitcomb was finally getting married? Regan led the incredulous wave of, you have to be kidding. Well, after all, Kit said thoroughly, he is only in his early 40s. He's not bad looking. What? Regan interrupted. He's wimpy looking. Kit ignored her. He really is a good teacher. They all nodded in agreement. Regan injected. He always seemed like the typical prenatal bachelor. All his time off he spent gardening at his aunt's house. Who is he marrying anyway? A teacher who came the term after we were all here, Kristen told her. Did they just discover each other, or have they been planting daisies together for the past 10 years? What's her name anyway? Regan asked. Val Twyler. Rumor has it she's been after him for the past couple of years. She teaches English Lit, is a few years younger than Philip, very intelligent and very efficient. Well, she'll need to be married to Philip, Regan added. He never wore matching socks or tucked his shirt in properly. Oh my God, look who's coming. They all turned to see Claire James push through the line full of people waiting for tables. Obviously, she had spotted them. 10 years had not changed her preference for LL Bean outfits with matching headbands. Hey, y'all, she droned. How come nobody came to get me this morning? I just never sleep this doggone late. It was obvious, Regan thought, that Claire was still playing the Southern Belle. Claire looked around. You guys all just look super. And Regan, I just love your new little hairdo. You look so much better with it short. Under the table, Kit stepped on Regan's foot with significant pressure. Regan refilled her cup of tea as Claire, obviously assuming they'd all be fascinated to hear, filled them in on the fact that she has been married, divorced, and was now engaged again. And I've traveled and traveled, she concluded airily. Regan, I always pack one of your mother's books to read on the plane. Where does she get those crazy ideas? That last one had me so scared. Did you know I looked up Athena's family in Greece last year? Is Athena back in the family fold? Regan asked. No, she's not. They never heard another word from her. Wouldn't you think she'd at least send a postcard? She never showed up? Regan exclaimed. And they never tried to trace her? Well, after a while they tried, but she just vanished into thin air. I wish I had known, Regan thought. Nobody just vanishes into thin air. Claire dismissed the subject with a wave of her hand. Did any of you read the reunion schedule? She continued. Before the dinner tonight, Philip's aunt, that sweet old dear lady, has invited us for cocktails at her house. Remember she gave us that farewell party 10 years ago? Regan remembered. She remembered the drafty old house, the muddy grounds, which, even then, Philip was meticulously turning into an English garden. The cheese whiz on a stale biscuit, and best, or worst of all, Philip's aunt, Lady Victoria Whitcomb Exner. At age 40, half her lifetime ago, to the total astonishment of her relatives and friends, Victoria had married Sir Gilbert Exner, then 86 years old. He quite considerably died of a heart attack 2 weeks later, leaving much speculation as to whether Victoria's untried limbo had been set free in the drafty master bedroom of Llewellyn Hall. Regan was rather fond of Lady Exner. Then again, she had only seen her in small doses. 10 years ago, Victoria Exner's sole society activity had seemed to consist of having her nephew, the professor, invite his students over for sherry. Regan realized Claire was still talking. I think they're going to announce Philip's engagement tonight, Claire declared. I haven't seen Philip since we left this town, Kit reflected. Regan realized she hadn't seen Philip since the last night when they got into discussion about Athena. She remembered now that Philip's assessment of the situation had turned her off, yet in an odd way had been a comfort. It's one of those hazards of being an heiress, he had said. In a year or two she'll have run through her inheritance and be back home with Daddy. Wait and see. Regan found herself wondering whether Philip knew that Athena had never gone home to Daddy. After breakfast, they spilled out onto the corn market, where legendary traffic congregation, throngs of people, and the addition of 3 fast food chains belittled the fact that by just stepping behind the college walls that lined Oxford's downtown area, you could be transported into another world where medieval charm remained intact. Tradition and progress were always at odds with each other in this picturesque town of soaring spires, exquisite gardens, flowing rivers, and wide open spaces. Known as a cyclist city, it was also a major manufacturer of automobiles. After wandering around for no more than a half an hour, the group decided to split up. Everyone had a different agenda, and it was too hard to keep track of each other in the midst of all the Saturday shoppers. Let's rent bicycles and ride around the countryside, Regan suggested to Kit. I sure could use the exercise. Let's do it. They probably have the same bicycles we rented 10 years ago, Kit replied. Oh, God, I hope not. I don't feel like spending the afternoon trying to put the chain back on mine, Regan said, remembering her bicycle knack of falling apart on deserted roads 3 miles out of town. They rode around Oxford, commenting with disgust on all the new construction. They swung down to the southern part of town, cycled past Christchurch Meadow, and at 1 o'clock they stopped for lunch in a pub along the Cherwell River. They sat at a table by the window and breathed in the sense of the damp earth that was slowly being warmed by the tentative sunlight, and the musty, oaky smell of the pub. It brought back memories of Kibble boys with whom they had gone pub crawling. God only knows what happened to those guys, Regan wondered as she took a sip of rust-colored lager. Wouldn't it be fun to see them again? Oh, they're probably all working in London and making piles of money, Kit replied as she looked out at a relaxed group punting slowly down the river. It's hard to believe that when we knew them, They were the future leaders of this country. Remember knocking on Ian's door? If it's a boy, I'm getting dressed. If it's a girl, come on in, Kit said as she imitated Ian's logical Welsh accent. I wonder what he would say now if he saw you pull out your gun and snap handcuffs on somebody. He'd probably ask to borrow them. Over a meal of shepherd's pie, they expressed surprise at Claire's ability to snare another guy when she didn't even seem to have any rendering qualities. But Kit, we've never met either one of them. I can just imagine what they're like. Like your blind date who wore that big furry hat and two spargles? Exactly. And to think he was listed in some magazine as one of the top 10 most eligible bachelors in the country. You never told me that. What magazine? Kit said eagerly. I don't remember the name, Reagan replied, but I think his mother was the publisher. At 4 o'clock they returned to the dorm, observed themselves the invitation to Llewellyn Hall, decided they could squeeze in an hour's nap, and in their rooms dove again for the cots with the dark green bedspreads. Chapter 4. 2 school vans, whose new car smells had faded away sometime in the late 60s, were waiting at 6 p.m. to pick up the 15 alumni who had shown up for the reunion and take them for the 2-mile drive to Lady Exner's house. As the van bounced along, Reagan began to catch up with some of her former classmates she had not yet seen. On one level, her mind was registering how some people looked different, others almost exactly the same, while absorbing what they had been doing over the past decade. On another level, her mind was instantly serving a nagging worry that had begun this morning when she learned that Athena had never resurfaced. The driver of the van, one of the new young professors, almost overshot Llewellyn Hall, slammed on the brakes and went into immediate reverse, throwing them all back and forth like kernels bursting into popcorn. "So sorry," he chirped, more to himself than the others, as he steered the van down the long oak lined driveway, rattling to a stop in front of the mansion. Kit turned to Reagan. "Are we having a good time yet?" Faint moans of agony accompanied the movement of the visiting alumni as, stooping and bending, they stumbled out of the van onto their insulated limbs. "I need a drink," Reagan heard someone mutter. "I need 2 drinks," Reagan thought. Lady Exner had obviously been watching for them. The great entrance doors of Llewellyn Hall flew open, and with crows of delight she started jumping up and down with glee, rattling off their names as though she'd seen them yesterday. "Oh my God, look at her!" Kit sounded awestruck. The last time they'd seen Lady Exner, her iron gray hair had been pulled back into a fierce bun, and a pleated wool skirt, high neck, long sleeve blouse with a silver brooch at the neck. Inset with her mother-in-law picture and a Scottish wool sweater had been her de rigueur manner of dressing. Now she had on an iridescent gold silk suit with a matching scroll neck blouse that swooped low on her chest. From directly behind Reagan heard Claire's observe, "I swear she must go to your hairdresser, Reagan." Reagan resisted the urge to trip her, even while she acknowledged to herself that Lady Exner's Melutinate bun had been transformed into a creakle-cut perm colored, the same as the gold suit. Lady Exner was not reluctant to talk about the metamorphosis as she escorted them into the drawing room overlooking the garden. "I had a heart attack 4 years ago," she almost said gleefully. "The doctor warned me the heart is getting tired, and you need to be careful." You know what I told him? I told him I have been careful all my life except for my 2-week odyssey with Sir Gilbert. I went straight home and made a list of all the things I wished I'd done in this lifetime, but had been afraid to try. And now I am doing them all. She fluttered her gnarled, blue-veined hands and wrists. "See these rings and bracelets? I've always loved my friend Mom's jewelry. I've never had any jewelry except for the pin with Sir Gilbert's mother's picture on it and her wedding ring. When Mom passed on to the higher plane last year, I decided, why not? The estate had to sell her jewelry to raise money for the taxes, and now it's mine. All mine. Lovely, isn't it? I bought new clothes, changed my hairdo, and best of all, I'm taking trips. Philip insisted I have a companion. And here she is. They were at the entrance into the drawing room. This Lady Exner had clearly not changed. Victorian sofas in fading damask, an oriental carpet whose colors were virtually indistinguishable, horsehair chairs by the fireplace, portraits of long-forgotten Exners, all of whom looked less than thrilled, and a tea table burdened with Lady Exner's usual cocktail offerings. Anchovies on damping toast points, a bowl of limp potato chips, and a mound of fish pate that resembled bird droppings. Ew. Okay. A rotund woman whom Reagan guessed to be about 60, with short cropped hair, large round glasses, and obnoxious expression, was studying the serving table. A 50-ish weary beanpole in a maid's uniform was at her side. Everything looks perfect, the woman declared. The anxious expression clearing from her face, she turned smiling. Ah, Lady Exner, we're just ready for your guests. A moment later, Reagan's hand was being crushed by the vicious, grasping squeeze of Penelope Atwater. Your mother's books have made our travels so pleasant. Lady Exner always buys 2 copies hardcover. We read them at the same time, and whoever figures out the murder buys the other one the first sherry of the day. We both love to meet Nora Reagan Riley and discuss her plots with her and where she gets her ideas, and 10 years ago I told Reagan her mother should write my life story. Now, is it that much more interesting? I've been gathering my notes in journals, Victoria said gaily. Reagan, knowing that Lady Exner had written to her mother a couple of times with ideas on how they should novelize her memoirs, decided to ignore the hint. Tell me about your trips, she said. The 2 women beamed at each other. Well, we'll start by going to Spain, Lady Exner told her. That was 4 years ago. It was wonderful. I met so many nice people. They say the English are reserved, but not me. Her hearty laugh revealed that she had also invested in new dentures. The only trouble was that I get so much agita from all the spicy food, Penelope told her with a mournful sigh. And we went to Venice last September for the blessing of the fleet. Victoria continued, all my life I wanted to see Venice, and I wasn't disappointed. The scurvy they served in St. Mark's Plaza really set it off, Penelope informed them. Set off what? Kit asked as she joined the conversation. My agita, Penelope replied forcibly. Reagan got the impression that Penelope Atwater's agita was a constant topic of conversation during their travels. Well, let's hope your stomach holds out on the Queen Guinevere next week, Lady Exner said. Once that ship pulls out of Southampton, that's it for you for the next 5 days. The Queen Guinevere? Reagan tried to keep this dismay out of her voice. You're sailing next week? On Monday. I've always wanted to go to New York, and my cousin's daughter has been writing to me so much these last few years. I've never met her, but she seems like such a dear girl. Only 40 years old, has had 3 marriages to men who took advantage of her sweet nature, and is now struggling to raise 2 daughters alone. She wants to stay with her and get to know them, and then I hope I can pursue her to come here for dear Philip's wedding in September, and maybe even stay for the year. Her daughters could go to school at St. Polycarp's, and they all could live with me. Who knows? They might want to stay forever. We have so little family as it is. Victoria's plans for her newfound cousins did not interest Reagan. What terrified her was that Luke and Nora would be on that crossing. It was obvious Kit had the same thought. "Regan, isn't that the ship your mother—" Regan gave Kit a warning pinch as she broke in. "We're all so anxious to see Philip again and meet his fiancée." "Val makes me nervous," Penelope said. "She gives me a good—" "Oh, she's quite all right," Victoria said. "A bit overbearing, of course, but Philip needs looking after, and I won't be here forever. Now I really must see some of the other guests." The maid, wearing an expression that seemed to signify permanent resignation, was passing a tray of sherry. Regan and Kit each plucked a glass and escaped to stand by the window. "I'm sorry I almost let the cat out of the bag," Kit told her, "but I suppose it wouldn't have made much difference. She's sure to hear your mother's on board, and once she knows it, she'll never give her a minute's peace." "Not necessarily, unless she's on a public tour. My mother travels as Mrs. Luke J. Riley. She tries to avoid the celebrity bit when she and my father are on vacation." "Well, that's good. Your mother's so nice. She'd have a hard time telling Victoria to get lost," Kit said. "Those gardens really are beautiful, aren't they?" As far as the eye could see, the property had been covalized in an exquisite English garden with formal beds of variety flowers, including pinks, marigolds, forget-me-nots, delphiniums, pansies, and bratmum stalks. Okay, all separated by pebble footpaths. Toward the side of the house, a large tract of land had been turned into a vegetable garden. "I wonder how Philip could have possibly have done all that by himself. I've killed so many plants with too much water, not enough water, too little sun, too much sun, no plant food, the wrong plant food. I can't keep a weed alive in my apartment." "Oh, Regan, I'm sure you just don't give yourself enough credit," Claire trilled in Regan's ear. Regan had the immediate thought that Claire had all the makings of a private investigator, and an ability to turn up where she wasn't wanted and hear what wasn't intended for her ears. "I bet you talk to your plants, Claire," Regan said sweetly. "You bet. I just chatter away to them," Claire agreed. "Wouldn't you just think that with the way Philip has made those grounds so beautiful, the old lady would spring for a little interior decorating? I mean, there's old, and then there's old. Well, maybe when Philip gets married, his wife will take this place in hand." "It really isn't hers to take in hand," Regan observed. "Oh, well, you know what I mean. Philip practically lives here now, and it will be his house someday, and it is a regular oasis with all the new construction in town. I wonder if he plans to turn the whole 500 acres into gardens. Oh, look, here he is now, and that must be his intended." There was a surge to greet the newcomers. Victoria cried triumphantly, "There you are, my dear boy! We're all waiting for you to make your announcement." Philip's blush covered his face and ran up to his thinning shandy hair. "Oh, dear, it sounds as if you already have." Regan remembered that Philip had a slight stammer when he became flustered. There's no sign of nervousness in the woman at his side. Regan immediately impression of Val Twiller was that she had a beige look. Sandy hair almost the same color as Philip's, a shallow complexion with pale brown eyes. Her features were sharp, her body taut and angular. She was wearing a tan gabardine skirt, a white long-sleeve blouse, and a low-heeled brown shoes. Her smile, as she returned Victoria's greeting, revealed large, strong teeth that gave a horsey look to her narrow face. But when Regan was introduced to her, Val seemed genuinely warm. "Philip and Victoria have introduced me to all your mother's books. I've enjoyed them." Philip hugged Regan and Kit. "St. Polycarp's hasn't been the same since you two passed through here." They congratulated him on his engagement. "Don't quite know what kind of husband material I am," he said, laughing nervously. but Val's a dear. The maid began moving through the room carrying a tray of canapes. Her best customer was Penelope Antwater. No wonder she gets heartburn, Regan observed to Kit. She's gobbling up those repulsive hors d'oeuvres smeared with that vile-looking pâté. Well, maybe if she eats them all, they won't notice that nobody else is going back for seconds. The vans were picking them up at 8 o'clock to take them back to St. Polycarp's for dinner. At 10 of 8, they began to say goodbye to their hosts. The phone rang as Regan was bidding bon voyage to the seafaring travelers, praying that they would not somehow learn that her mother was on board. The maid summoned Philip. I asked if you couldn't ring back in a few minutes, but they said it's very important. A moment later, when Philip returned to the drawing room, his face was drained of color. He said, I'm afraid there's been a problem. The police superintendent is on his way over. He must speak to all of you. At the chorus of questions, Philip said quietly, You were all in her class, you see. Preparation gathered on his forehead. Regan saw Val slip her hand into his and pat his arm. They seem to have found what's left of her body. He gestured vaguely toward the rear of Victoria's estate. On that building site, it adjoins our northeast end. They were blasting a few hours ago. A watchman noticed something and summoned the police. Notice what? Regan demanded. Remains of that St. Polycarp's jacket. The body under some leaves, a knapsack with her student card. Athena? Regan asked as a stab of pain wrenched her chest. Yes, that's it. His stammer had disappeared. It does seem as though the body is that of Athena Populus. Chapter 5. Sunday, June 21st, Oxford. Nigel Livingston had been the superintendent of police in Oxford for 8 years. He had not been there when Athena Populus disappeared. After her body was found Saturday afternoon, and he had his first meeting with her classmates at Llewellyn Hall, he studied the file carefully. A second meeting was scheduled at Lady Exeter's home for the next morning, and Livingston had made notes on what questions he wanted to ask and whom he intended to... Eli! Thanks for walking in front of me. Sorry, y'all. Okay. To whom he intended to direct them. No, you leave that alone, baby. The sun was shining brightly as he pulled into the driveway of the estate. It had been generous of Lady Exeter to suggest that all the questioning be done in her home. He concluded as he got out from behind the wheel of his car, grunting slightly with the effort. He put on 2 stone in the last 5 years, and now that he turned 50, was becoming aware that he had to get into better shape. When he looked in the mirror, he was seeing his father's face. A ruddy complexion, lined forehead, and heavy-set jaw topped with reasonably full head of salt and pepper hair. He closed the door of his car and for a moment stood silently, appreciating the restful quiet of the lovely property. Hard to believe that property this valuable hadn't been swallowed up in the building boom. It wasn't as though Llewellyn Hall was qualified as an official historical site. He walked toward the door and concentrated again on the business at hand. As he rang the bell, he thought of the people he had met last night and most wanted to talk to today. Topping that list was Regan Riley, who had been the roommate of Athena Populus and was now a private investigator. And then there was Philip Whitcomb. That girl, Claire, had confided to him that she always thought Athena had a crush on Philip, and that 10 years ago Philip had been good-looking in a dreamy, poetic way. The maid admitted him into the house. "They're in the drawing-room, sir." It was evident that Livingston, that the initial shock had worn off, and the assembled young woman had probably talked half the night about the death. A number of them were holding teacups, and there was a platter of hors d'oeuvres he had refused when he came to the house last evening. They looked as though they had been left out all night. Philip Wincombe was standing at the window looking out at his former country gardens, as though the sight of them was somehow giving him comfort. His fiancée, Val Twyler, was standing beside him, her arm slipped through his. Nigel realized that was exactly the way they had been standing last night, and he had in conscious thought that maybe they hadn't budged since then. Lady Exner rushed into the room behind him. This morning she was wearing a bright pink jumpsuit that would, Livingston decided, have been more appropriate for his 15-year-old daughter. "Dear Inspector," she cried, "how noble of you to not take these sweet young girls down to that dreary station. I do hope you won't need to question Penelope much. She was really most distressed with Agita last night. However, brave soul that she is, she will join us shortly. Livingston reflected that since Penelope had not set foot in Oxford until Lady Exner hired her as a companion 4 years ago, he would not have been distressed to have her distress keep her out of the way. Last night she has exhibited a macabre interest in the crime, and even gone so far as to ask if she could view the body. "Reading suspense has always been my passion," she told him with nervousness betraying laugh. Murmuring what he hoped were appreciated expression of sympathy, Livingston walked over to the fireplace. All eyes focused on him. "The autopsy is complete," he announced. "Athena Populus did indeed die of strangulation. There is absolutely no question of accidental death. If you'll remember, last night I asked you to try to think of anything Athena might have told you, in however casual fashion, that might make you think she was planning to meet someone, or if she was quietly dating someone who lived or worked in the vicinity." As he expected, the response was generally negative. He tried another tack. "Let's talk about her family again. What did she say about them?" Again, what he heard was the same as last night. Athena and her wealthy Paramount parents did not get along. On a couple of occasions, Athena had told Regan Riley about her aunt's murder that summer before she came to St. Polycarp's, but then never wanted to talk about it again. Apparently her aunt had left the beach, gone back to her house for a prescription sunglass, and stumbled onto a burglary in progress, a crime that turned deadly. Athena had hated St. Polycarp's, avoided friendships, and no one was that surprised when she disappeared, particularly since she had just come into a large trust fund from her grandmother. "Well, I think there was one person who was surprised." Claire's voice was honey-sweet. "I know you all don't agree with me, but Southern girls can tell this kind of thing. Athena had a mad crush on Philip. I used to watch her face when he read that sexy Greek poetry." Philip's face turned scarlet. "Surely you can't be serious." Val's eyes and lips narrowed. Her face flushed. "That's nonsense," she snapped. "Now, Val, honey, you weren't even there at the time. I didn't say Philip had a crush on Athena. That really would be ridiculous. I said Athena had a crush on him. I just kept thinking about it all night long. After all, the inspector did ask us to think on poor Athena." Kit and Regan were seated on the scratchy love seat. "I can't believe what I just heard," Kit whispered to Regan. Livingston looked to Regan for her response. "Miss Riley, you were Athena's roommate." Do you think she had a crush on the professor? Reagan thought that Claire had a crush on Philip 10 years ago. Was this her way of causing trouble? I can honestly say that if she did, I didn't notice it. But you must understand, it was impossible to get close to Athena. I never gave up trying. Oh no, sorry. I gave up trying. Llewellyn's arm had been on the mantel. He straightened up. Well, if anything comes to mind that any of you think might be helpful, please let me know. Terribly sorry I'm so dreadfully late, Penelope said, her face pale and shiny with perspiration, made a somewhat bedraggled entrance into the room. The pockets of her oversized wool cardigan were jammed with crumpled tissues, the tops of which peeked out in an unlovely disarray. Her gathered and rumpled skirt reached unevenly to the general area of her mid-calf. Her flesh-colored easel hose lay in exhausted folds around her ankles, kissing the top of her Reeboks. I must find out where she shops, Kit whispered to Reagan. Val, you're a love. That pot of tea really settled my nasty little tummy. Little tummy, Reagan whispered back to Kit. Like a homing beacon, Penelope swooped on the tray of hors d'oeuvres. Can you believe I'm actually hungry? A few hours ago, I never wanted to see food again. As they say, you've got to get back right on the horse. Never mind getting back on the horse. We have to get on that ship tomorrow. Reagan thought that Victoria's voice had a slight edge to it. She didn't blame her. She knew Victoria had her heart set on this trip and needed the rather dubious companionship of Penelope. Odd. She watched Penelope shovel a stack of hors d'oeuvres on a cocktail napkin, which she arranged as a carrying case. Livingston's voice was filled with weary resignation as he said, You really should not have troubled yourself, Miss Antwater. And now I do want to apologize to all of you for having to take up so much of your time during your brief stay in Oxford. He turned to Philip. You have no plans to travel, I assume, Professor? Philip's face turned scarlet again. Absolutely not. Again, Val's face registered injustice. Philip and I are in charge of the summer program at St. Polycarp's. We'll be staying here to look after the place while Lady Exner is away. You can reach him at any time. Quite so, Livingston replied, his voice offhand as he turned his gaze on Reagan. Miss Riley, you of all people had the most opportunity to hear something that may have seemed insignificant. I realize it's been a long time, but your mind is trained for investigative detail. Reagan joined him at the fireplace as others refilled their teacups. I've been trying to remember anything that might help. I kept a journal while I was here that's packed away at my parents' house in New Jersey, along with pictures I took. My parents are away now, but when they get back next week, I'll ask my mother to send it to me in Los Angeles. I have a feeling it might trigger something. She smiled at Livingston. At the time, I thought it would be crazy not to try and capture on paper my impressions of Oxford. Her smile disappeared and she looked thoughtful. Of course, I never thought I'd end up searching it for clues in a murder investigation. But I did live with Athena for 8 months, and her name appears in it so many times. There might be something. Reagan turned as Val offered her another cup of tea. No thanks, Val. I appreciate your help, Livingston said as he bowed slightly. I'm scheduled to leave tomorrow, but I'd like to remain in contact with you and do anything I can to find out who could have done this to Athena. Absolutely. Reagan suddenly felt as if the room seemed too close. It was almost as though the smell of death were in it. She realized that the scent of flowers coming through the open windows was reminding her of the Riley funeral homes. She turned to Kit. Why don't we walk back? Good idea. We can stop at the pub down the road, Kit whispered. Hurriedly, they again extended good wishes to Philip and Val. I'll be thinking of you on your big day, Regan said. September 14th, isn't it? She shook Penelope's hand and kissed Lady Exner's rubbed cheeks. I know you'll love sailing to New York, she said. I'll keep careful notes of my journey, Victoria promised, so that when I finally get to meet your mother, I shall have a complete account of this new adventure in my remarkable life. You must give me your mother's number. I understand New Jersey isn't far from where my nieces live in Long Island. Your nieces? I thought they were your cousins, Regan asked. Nieces, cousins, whatever. Well, Regan said tentatively, maybe you could get together with my mother for lunch in New York City. Splendid, Victoria cried. Penelope, she shouted, give me a pen. For the rest of the day, Regan and Kit attempted to pick up the schedule of the disrupted reunion. In the late afternoon, they went punting on the river, followed by a buffet dinner in the home of the headmaster. A nice spread, Kit commended to Regan. What do you bet we get letters next week asking for alumni donations? You're a born critic, Regan said in a low voice, as she helped herself to potato salad. We'll just have to pretend they got lost in the mail. A number of the professors at the diner had known Athena, and invariably the conversation centered on the discovery of the body and the questioning by Superintendent Livingston. It was 11 p.m. when Regan and Kit finally walked up the 2 flights to their rooms. I can't wait to get out of here, Kit said. This dorm seems even more depressing than usual. At least we had a good time in Venice and Paris last week. What time did you say your flight is? 1 o'clock, just an hour after yours. Kit was flying to New York, Regan to Los Angeles. They were at the room. Regan pulled the key out of her pocket and pushed open the door. There was an envelope on the floor addressed to her. Call me no matter what time you get in. Desperately important. It was signed Philip Whitcomb. Chapter 6. Knowing jolly well it was useless, Philip Whitcomb had tried to dissuade his Aunt Victoria from traveling alone on the Queen Guinevere. He, Val, the doctor, and a most determined Lady Exner were in the small waiting area down the hall from Penelope's room at Royal Oxford Hospital. Penelope's moans could be heard the length of the corridor. She would be here at least 2 days recovering from an acute food poisoning, and under no circumstances would she be well enough to go on holiday, at least not until the end of the week. I am absolutely not going to defer my trip, Lady Exner said. I don't care if there is a sailing in 2 weeks. I may not be alive in 2 weeks. Penelope can fly over to New York when she recovers. I am leaving tomorrow. Her face took on an mulish look that Philip knew only too well. Lady Exner, if I may suggest, the doctor began. You may not suggest that I stay home, she snapped at him. A trip deferred is a trip denied. He who hesitates is lost. Today is the first day of the rest of your life, and tomorrow is the first day of my holiday. Her smile was more forced than pleasant. Don't you think Miss Antwater will feel bad if you leave without her? The doctor said. Not nearly as bad as I'll feel if I'm not on that ship. And besides, I told her to stop stuffing her face yesterday. She got up. I must go home and complete my packing. Penelope is quite all right, isn't she, Doctor? She's most uncomfortable, really quite ill. But I believe she will be fine, the doctor agreed. Thank you. Philip, Val, come along. May I make a suggestion, Lady Exner? Val asked. It depends on what it is. Not that you stay home, Val said smoothly, but you'll enjoy the trip that much more if you have a companion. Val, Who could you possibly expect to get on such short notice? Philip asked impatiently. The bloody ship sails in 13 hours. Val's narrow smile was triumphant. Someone who has already packed, who, according to her own words, has just completed an assignment, and who would probably welcome the chance to spend some time with dear Veronica. Regan Riley. Regan listened with increasingly dismay as Philip pleaded with her to accept the assignment of playing guardian angel to Victoria for 5 days and nights. If she goes on that ship alone, I'll know she'll end up in the middle of the Atlantic. A second sherry goes directly to her head, and I'm told the main activity on those ships is drinking. Penelope loves to eat. She could chew her way through an oak tree faster than a horde of beavers. So she keeps Veronica drinking down by steering her to the buffet table instead of the bar. I'll pay you double your daily rate. It's a 24-hour day job. In fairness, I must warn you, her sleeping habits can be odd. Sometimes she loves to stay up half the night, which means she'll take a 3-hour afternoon nap. If she naps in the afternoon, at least you'll have some time for yourself, Philip continued. Double pay, Regan thought, and 5 days at sea on a luxury vessel. She had the time. She had even called Livingston and offered to stay on for a bit, but he had said that at this point there was really nothing she could do. Maybe when Victoria is napping she'll be able to sneak in some visits with her parents. All right, Philip, what time will they pick me up? You're doing what? Kit's voice was almost a shriek when Regan explained the phone call. Riley, I've got to tell you, I think you've really lost it this time. I'm being paid. It eases the pain. Regan kicked off her shoes. Believe it or not, I'm riding all the way to Southampton in a St. Polycarp's van with a shake-em-up and Edwin at the wheel. I better get some sleep. Kit, who had already changed, yawned as she got into bed. Well, one thing I do agree with. Victoria shouldn't be let out without a leash. There we go. But better you than me. I'll drive down from Connecticut and be your welcoming committee when your ship comes in. Hopefully you won't have to be carried off.